Folks, this is Steve Sanchez, Jim Jonas, another episode of Veterans in Politics. We're live with Ed Bridges, who's a congressional candidate for District 3. But before that, what's going on?
Not too much. Been another interesting week. I really appreciate Ed coming on. I'm sure Ed has a lot of things he could be doing right now rather than here on a Thursday morning sitting with us. One of the things that I wanted to talk about just real quick is that here's the thing. Like, so I've been listening to people complaining about Steve Sisolak isn't handling this thing right, Trump isn't handling it right, Pelosi's doing this, she's against the stimulus bill, Mitch McConnell's stimulus bill is garbage, on and on and on, right? Well, okay, so do something about it. Like, the thing that drives me absolutely nuts in life in general is people that complain about stuff but do nothing about it. So just so the viewers and listeners can understand this, politicians, we have to hold them accountable. We're their boss. They're not our bosses. So quit asking, hey, I'm not going to ask Ed, hey, Ed, what are you going to do for me? I'm going to ask Ed, hey, this is what I would like to see happen. Mm-hmm. And because if Ed gets elected, then I'm his boss, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And that's the way the system was supposed to be set up. But now everybody walks around, they complain, but a lot of them vote now. I mean, the turnout isn't as good as I would like to see. But it's hilarious when I listen to people go, well, I voted. And I'm like, well, okay, cool. Who'd you vote for? They're like, well, I just voted for the Democrat or I voted for the Republican. I'm like, why? They're like, well, because they're a Democrat or Republican or independent or IAP or libertarian or whichever party it is. And I'm like, but what do they stand for? And they're like, well, I don't know, I just kind of, that's the party I associate with. And I'm like, well, if they're not doing a good job, but you're just going to vote the party, then shame on you. I think people just need to be more involved in the process. And by involved, I don't mean just simply voting. I mean, yes, please do vote. But you have to educate yourself and learn what these candidates are going to do. And then what the politicians that are in office right now are currently doing. And if you don't like it, change it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
No.
That's it?
That's it.
Well,
change it at the ballot box.
Yeah. Right.
Speaking of the ballot box, we're mailing in for primary now. We can't show up. Hopefully the general will be able to show up and do it in person. But
right, yeah.
The primary we're mailing in according to the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
The only Republican in our Constitution seat, by the way, Barbara Sagrowski. I don't know how that happened, but I found it unusual that we got a Democratic governor, a Democratic lieutenant governor, a Democratic attorney general, a Democratic state controller, a Democratic treasurer, but a Republican secretary of state. I've never seen that before. It's usually all down the ballot. If it's right. Republican, it's Republican all the way down. If it's Democrat, I've never seen that. Is Barbara Sagrowski a Democrat?
I know Barbara pretty well. I would say that she's pretty much in the mainstream. I would say she's right of center.
Or she's just loved by everybody, or the Democrat put up a shitty candidate to run against her.
Well, the latter might be the truth on that one. Sometimes that's the way it happens. Unfortunately, way too many times, people vote for the lesser of two evils.
Yeah. So we have Ed Bridges here. Mr. Bridges, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm proud to be here and glad to be here. You said I might have many other things to do. There's no place else I'd rather be right now than right here.
Thank you. we've known you a long time.
Sir? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you ran for Congressional District 3 several years ago.
In 09 through the primary.
Oh, 9.
Yeah.
What was that, 11 years ago?
Yeah.
Wow. Could you give us a bio about yourself?
Sure. I'm 22 years in the Air Force.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for yours. And glad to be there. Glad to be here.
You retired as a what?
Colonel.
Colonel.
Full
Full bird?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
full bird.
Full bird colonel. But, that's just what I retired at. Spend most of my time in something else, just getting there.
Right.
And that's then, and this is now. I
Right.
got involved some years ago because when I was sworn in, I took an oath of office that I'll never be relieved from.
Right.
It says I'll support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I didn't like the way our country was going, so in 09, maybe ill-advised, I decided, like you said, to do something about it. So I decided that the best thing I could do is run for office and get out there and throw my hat in and take my bumps and try to do something about it and get this place back on the Constitution. It's my opinion that both of our major parties are broken.
What party do you represent, by the way?
I represent the Independent American Party, and that's a change.
You used to be Republican, right?
I was a Republican, have been for years. I still would support them, but I think they're broken. And what I see is, I don't see the parties talking, and if you listen to their leaders and what they're saying, even today, it's about how can we get party in power? How can we get the party in power? Well, what about the people? We're supposed to be working for the people, not the party. And
Right.
to me, that's become their central focus. And I attended the state convention of the Independent American Party recently, and they said some things I like to hear about the Constitution. They want to get us back and focus on the Constitution more than party power. Let's get the Constitution back in our lives. Educate the children in the Constitution. There is a bill, I think it's 88-147 or something, but that doesn't matter. What matters is there is a public law that requires all of our public schools to focus on September 17th, the week of September 17th. And if I asked most people on the street, they wouldn't even know what that date meant. Well, September 17th, 1789 is when our Constitution was approved and went into effect. And schools don't teach it anymore. Young people don't know what the Bill of Rights is. And that's very important to all of us.
Right.
And this party is elsewhere. And other than Nevada, it's called the Constitution Party. It is a third party. We all know that a third party is going to be hard to get anywhere because of the money, for one thing, in our political system, and how entrenched the two major parties are. But doesn't mean we can't do something about it and try. We want to get out, and I want to get our message across. I'm here for the people. I'm not here for myself. I don't need to go up there and beat myself up, and as you do in Congress. I almost said when I didn't win in the primary in 09 and 10, I almost said, thank you, Lord, because I would have been beat up. It's not, they don't, well, let's just say they focus on their own power. They want their own, power, they want their own money. That's what many people work for. One of my competitors at the time, before an audience at the University of Nevada, that was asked, what's your objective in running for Congress? And he said, I want to serve 2 terms and retire. And that was his objective. And unfortunately, that's many people's objective.
Well, what do you? I mean, the only parties that are representing us in Congress
Right.
are Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah. There's one in that.
Is there
one
any third
independent.
party out of the 462 congresspersons?
35.
35. Is there any other party representing us?
Well, there's one.
There's one. There's one independent, and I don't.
But he was originally a Democrat and switched to
Exactly.
independent.
Exactly.
I think it's a congressman from Vermont.
I don't recall myself. I'd like to.
Because I know years ago in the Senate, Lieberman did the same thing.
Yes, that's
Because he's an independent, but he still caucuses with the Democrats.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So how do you see yourself winning?
Well, I'm not sure. It would be amazing.
I mean, that's the reason why you put your name on the ballot is to win. So when you put your name on the ballot and you know that out of 435 congressional people in
Yeah.
D.C., only one
Yeah.
is an independent, and that person is an independent because they didn't originally go in as an independent. They went in as a Democrat, then they switched while they were in office.
Exactly.
How do you see
Well, first of all,
your party or you are becoming a congressional congressperson if
I see it
nobody wins in your party?
I see it as a very long shot, Steve. But first of all, you can't if you don't get in the ring. That's 100% given. The only way you're going to have a chance to win is if you get in the ring, throw your hat in, and get in there. I suspect that the main purpose that I will end up accomplishing, and it will be an achievement if I do, and that is to get the purpose and the function of the Independent American Party before the public. And express our ideas, let the public know that there is a choice, let them know that there's a party out there, and there's a group of people, well over 70,000 just in Nevada, in the party, working to keep us focused on the Constitution, believe in the Second Amendment, we don't believe in abortion, and just to get the party, just like the Republicans and Democrats want to get their objectives before the public. And if I can accomplish that, then I will have achieved my goal.
So Ed, do you currently reside in Congressional District 3?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, the reason why I'm asking that is, do you think, because right now, according to federal law, to run for Congress, you don't have to be in that district.
That's exactly right.
Do you think that should change?
Absolutely. I don't know how you can say that you represent your people if you don't live near them and don't know what they want. You have to, if we're going to respond to the people, well, you got to listen to the people.
Well, they always say you don't know somebody until you live with them, right?
You might say that. I don't want to touch that one. But yes, you're right. I think it should change. And I think that we ought to, I think our forefathers envisioned not politicians, not career politicians. They envisioned citizens coming forward, serving their country for a while, and going back to their job again. But they come out of the community that they represent, and then they can represent those people well. I don't believe we, at the moment, we have more career politicians than we do probably just citizen politicians.
So Ed, I'm going to ask you another question, and please, sir, I have a ton of respect for you for your service, and I didn't work on your campaign, but I know the person who ran your campaign and that stuff.
You're talking about his first run for Congressional District 3.
Yeah, when he ran a primary against Joe Heck. And Terry Dunn ran the campaign, which probably was your first mistake picking her. But anyway.
I'll just leave that one untouched. There were things could have been different.
Yeah. Well, So what advice would you give? So, I guess I'm middle aged now.
You?
Yeah. I'm
How old are you?
43.
No, you're not middle aged yet.
Okay. So and I agree with, and the reason why I'm asking this is and I'm being very genuine here. What advice would you give me? Because I try really hard to explain to people, like I was a huge supporter of Anthony Scalia.
Okay.
And I really liked what he said about the Constitution. He said it's a legal document. It says what it says, and it doesn't say what it doesn't say.
Right.
Like it's written right there. Like, but when I try to explain that to either people of my age or even a little younger, they roll their eyes.
Exactly. They don't understand. The Constitution is a firm document. It is the first basic law of our land.
Yeah.
It is not something that's to be interpreted as we go along. To me, it says what it says.
Yeah.
For example, I think we've strayed away from it. Article 10 of our amendments, or amendment number 10, says if we didn't give it to you and the powers of the federal government, it instructs the federal government and limits their powers, and it says if it's not written in here, you don't got that power. You don't have that power. And I would ask you, where is anything discussing education or health
Right.
in the basic Constitution? It isn't in there.
I'm glad you brought that up. So what do you think about block grants? Because that's something that I've always been a supporter of. I'm not sure what you were thinking on that one. Because for me, I'm a big supporter of the 10th Amendment also. And like a lot of people that aren't as well versed in the Constitution as yourself basically will say the 10th Amendment is basically states' rights. Like if it's not specifically given to the federal government in the Constitution, then that it goes to the state.
Exactly.
So I've always been a firm believer that I think that every state should just get a block grant, and then that goes to the governor, and then the governor doles it out to the counties, and then the counties and just so on and so forth.
Well, you're getting to a more basic question, is where does that money come from? And I presume you're talking about a block grant by the federal government.
Yes, right.
I'm not sure that's even required or should be a situation. And how would you proportion it if you do? Most we have over time yielded to the federal government because they have the money. And why do they have the money? Is they tax us.
Right.
But the government can never give anything to the people that it doesn't first take from the people. Right. And it's not a very effective pipeline.
Yeah.
It siphons off an awful lot of what the people give it for its own needs. And I heard the other day a startling statistic, if it's true, that about 70% of our workforce now works for a government, whether local or federal or state. And that's dangerous. That is getting very close to being a socialist situation. I hate to see it. I hate to have so many people. We could get into discussions about whether the income tax is constitutional or not, but a lot of people have discussed that, but we do have to live with it. Something we all forget, we blame the president, we blame the Congress and this sort of thing, but it is really the senior bureaucrats that control our lives. For example, controlling in stocks and bonds and the trade on the stock market, et cetera, is controlled by SEC. Anybody elect the president or the head of the SEC? Anybody even know who it is? No. We don't know anything about them. But yet, when they issue an edict, it has to be complied with. And so it's our bureaucracy that, and I think that's what Trump is talking about when he says clean up the swamp a lot.
The swamp, yeah.
And get these people accountable, more accountable.
What do you, this doesn't really pertain to your specific campaign, but I'm just curious, what's your opinion of Trump? Because I just think it's interesting that he gets so much backlash, and I've pretty much told people, I'm like, you do realize that foreign policy wise, he's pretty much running foreign policy like a Democrat. And then, I mean, on the economy, he's running it like a businessman. So I don't understand why the Democrats are so upset. They used to love him, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're upset.
In fact, he used to be a Democrat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
They're upset because he's doing what he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
That's the primary objective. If you'll recall, some of the key Democrats, and I'll leave them unnamed just because I don't want to give them the publicity, as soon as he was elected, they made it a major focus of their party was to belittle him and to destroy his administration. I'm very thankful we have a man like Trump in the party, in the presidency right now. And one of the reasons that I was influenced to leave the Republican Party and join the IAP is because the Republican Party, the Republicans did not support him very much at the first when he was first elected. They didn't like him, and my personal opinion, you ask for my opinion, I'll give you my opinion. They're like noses, everybody has one, and I have one. I think the Republicans did not like Mr. Trump because he came from outside the political system. They couldn't control him because he had more money than they did. They couldn't bribe him, so they weren't able to control him like they could typically a political person.
Yeah.
He's done exactly what he said he was going to do. He's working very hard. He doesn't take any pay. That's a plus. He, by the way, much of his pay goes to support veterans. And he came from the people. And the people like what he says.
And he's
like
raw.
And he's rough. And he's raw. That's right. He's just one of us. And he says it like he feels it. And he lets the chips fall where they might when he talks. And I don't always agree with everything he does, but I shouldn't.
No.
But I am so pleased. I'm very grateful that he's there.
You know, you mentioned the Constitution, but do you think the Constitution should be in every single courtroom?
Yes.
Are you aware that the Constitution is not followed in family court?
I do.
For one, there is no jury box.
I know. Yeah.
You know, so,
Right.
and that's one of the topics we've been working on since a few years now.
Yeah.
And what would you do about making sure that that family court, in particularly, follow the United States Constitution and start having a jury box on certain cases like termination of parental rights or relocation of children? I mean, we could start it there because you're taking away a loved one from a parent. So.
Sure. And we have to go back to the basic, though. That's left to the states in our original Constitution. And whether it must follow general guidelines, I think they definitely ought to have the option, because that's what the Constitution guarantees us. If
The litigants.
Exactly. If the litigants, if something's going to happen to me by my government, then I should have the protection of the Constitution. And one of those protections is a jury to to adjudicate.
Right. Just like the right to a speedy trial.
Exactly.
But how come that's not afforded in the family court system? Why did they just take it away? It's not even an option.
I don't know why we got where we are, Steve. I would like to, and I'd like to have a good answer for that one. But I can say that it's basically left to the local governments. And as long as they can provide for the rights that we guaranteed
Right.
in the Constitution, now the form of it is less important.
There's another thing that I scratch my head about is the difference between civil and criminal contempt.
Yep.
And in criminal contempt, if you cannot afford counsel,
Yep.
one would be provided for you
Yeah.
because you're looking at jail time.
Right.
In civil contempt, which is family court, supposed to be civil,
Yeah.
but they cross that line over criminal all the time. In civil contempt, if you can't afford a lawyer,
You don't got one.
you don't get one.
That's right.
You got to
don't go.
defend yourself, and you're still looking at jail time.
That's-
So does a jail
Equivalent.
cell know the difference between civil
No.
contempt and criminal contempt?
No, absolutely. not.
It's like friendly fire. Remember friendly fire in
Exactly.
combat?
You're still-
Friendly fire.
You're still shot.
You're dead is dead.
Right.
No matter who's shooting at you,
Still-
your mama or Saddam Hussein,
Yeah,
you know, you're dead.
still hurts.
You know, when they talk about, oh, it's friendly fire, I'm like, you're a moron then.
Yeah.
Why would you want to come and shoot your own people?
and that's a mutually exclusive term.
So they're trying to tell me the difference between civil and criminal contempt, and the only thing I know is that you're locked up.
That's right.
Period. No matter what you want to call it.
The result's the same, no matter.
Results is so why can't litigants have the same right in civil court as they do in criminal? As if they can't afford a lawyer, they could get legal representation.
Yeah, that would be a good.
Isn't that part of the Constitution as well?
It's any time that we are being challenged for wrongdoing,
Right.
or that may face penalty, we ought to be a Constitution.
Is there something a bill if you get elected you could put together or sponsor to make sure that the Constitution is being followed in family court as well? Because this is not just a county epidemic; it's a nationwide epidemic.
Yeah, it's probably grown out of one of them did it, so everybody else did the same thing. Yeah, it could be addressed. It could be addressed at the congressional level. I'd like to see it addressed at the states instead, however. What most of us don't realize is our law enforcement people. If you say, well, who is the senior law enforcement person in this county? You know?
Well, the senior law enforcement person in the county is the district attorney.
The sheriff. Is he?
Oh, the law. Well, the DA
enforcer,
enforces the law too.
Right. The sheriff.
But the way I look at that is that the sheriffs, they put together a packet
Yeah.
for court,
Yeah.
and it's up to the district attorney to decide, hey, we're
To
going to
work
move
it.
forward with court, or we're just going to not go at all.
Exactly.
So that's why.
Yeah. You see.
That's why I went with the district attorney.
Yeah. We often see and how they influence us is through the media. If you watch a television program, and if you watch one of these, detective things or something, and you've got a crime and the sheriff's working it, if the FBI comes in, they give it to them. They let it turn over to them.
Because
That's
the
wrong.
FBI gets jurisdiction.
And that's wrong. And the Supreme Court, about 8 or so years ago, I think it was in Tennessee, there were some federal officers in the community, and they were violating the citizens' rights by the way they were handling their investigation. And the sheriff arrested them and sent them out. And it went to the Supreme Court. And the reason the sheriff is the senior law enforcement official because he is the highest one that's elected by the people. has anything to do from the people. So in the case of the Bundy situation, our sheriff could have stopped that
Oh, yeah.
right quick. And I think you were out there, as I was, when they were out there pointing weapons at the family and shooting their cattle. I saw some of the cattle that had been shot. Nights out there supporting Mr. Bundy, and I still do.
Why is it so hard to do the right thing?
Why is it so?
An example, the Calvin Bundy situation. It's so hard to do the right thing because you're faced with scrutiny, you're faced with isolation,
Yeah.
you're
Overwhelming power that the federal government has.
Yeah.
You see, I think that originally, one of the reasons we have our Second Amendment is they envisioned the citizen having the same weapons that our federal government does.
Right.
And they're entitled to have and possess them because they had a vivid memory of a few dedicated citizens in standing up against the world's most powerful military and winning for their purpose.
Who are we talking about?
I'm talking about the people in, now my good old brain, in Lexington and Concord.
Yeah.
They said, hey, we're not going to let them come in here and take our armory, which is what they were coming in to do. Each little town had an armory, apparently. I wasn't there, so I don't know. Well, I'm getting close. I mean, I was close to being there, but in spite of my looks, I wasn't.
What's wrong with your looks?
Sir?
What's wrong with your looks? Despite of my looks, you weren't.
You've been here, been around a while.
Oh.
And I've done a few things in my life. And I've seen what can happen. I've been to 45 different countries, and I've seen that we don't have a very perfect system, but it's sure better than anything else that's out there. When it's run properly. And our forefathers said our system is only going to be good
It's God calling.
if we have excuse me. That's my public calling. It's most likely a robocall. Well,
Don't answer it. Oh, you answered. Now hang up.
sorry about that.
You're fine.
Yeah.
I hope you don't do that on the floor of Congress.
Yeah, me too. Well, actually, I hate the damn things.
It's kind of one of those things where it's almost a necessary evil at this point.
It
but
really is, and probably at the rate we're going, we'll be, as the baby is born, he'll be injected with something that has a communication back.
Definitely a GPS on everybody.
Exactly,
Oh, yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
But
Okay, well, we were talking about the people and then your family court. It's important. It's equally important that we follow and let the states have leeway. What's the boundary? Well, the boundary is the Constitution.
Right.
You can do it any way you want to, but as long as you provide the people and recognize that the people are the most important and that we are in charge of our government. But as our forefather says, our government is only capable of working with an educated and conscientious population.
Well, I think it was Thomas Jefferson that came down the steps of the Capitol, and they said, "What kind of government are you going to give us?" And he said, "A republic, if you can keep it."
Yeah, if you can handle it.
Yeah.
And George Washington says,
He hated political parties. Him and Ben Franklin did not like him at all.
Yeah, there's the only interesting little quote from Ben Franklin about our education system when they were talking about education. He said, if we don't educate our children in ethical and moral values, we will do nothing but create educated menaces to society.
Yeah, we have some of those in our elected seats right now.
Well, I think, if you can bear with me a minute, my own thumbnail sketch of our society and what happened. It's called Unintended Consequences. And starting in the mid-50s to the mid-60s, there were several things that happened that sounded very, very good, but the way they were administered and the way it ended up, they had negative effects on our society as we knew it. The first one was probably Dr. Spock when he said, "Don't paddle your children; you'll hurt their ego and their attitude toward themselves." Well, what do we have now? We have a lot of undisciplined children. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of undisciplined people, adults. We have some 40-year-old delinquents, juvenile delinquents, because they don't have any respect for anything else.
They didn't have any guidance.
And then some of them don't have any.
No discipline. Yeah. You talk about states' rights a minute ago, and regarding with the family court situation. But how about marijuana? Do you think marijuana should be a state right? And if so, shouldn't they be able to put those dollars that they receive from the purchase of marijuana into our federal banks? And if you were on board with that, would you pass legislation to make marijuana a federal mandate to go across all 52 states, or would you just have everybody doing what they're doing right now? The states take control, but they can't put it in the bank, so they're putting it under their mattress. I mean, the state is not. I mean, the federal government is not making any money off of what they could be making if they regulate it and allow it to be federally across the whole nation. They could start putting it in banks. Banks could start receiving, interest and dollars on those. But right now, the dispensaries can't put their monies in the bank unless they call it something else.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, they can't put that because it's federally illegal for marijuana still. But you're talking about state rights.
It's something I've never given a thought to, Steve. I haven't even thought about it.
It's big though.
I've never used marijuana. I've never been around people who do. Mm-hmm. My children went through a period when I'm sure they did, but I never have.
You didn't sneak some of those into officers' quarters?
Never did. I've never even. I wouldn't know what to do if I wanted some. What to do with it if I had it. So I haven't really, that's not something I've really given any thought to.
Well, at least you said that instead of I tried it, but I didn't know how to inhale.
Yeah, right. I didn't inhale.
Good old Slick Willie.
Who puts marijuana to their lips and not inhale? The whole purpose of marijuana is to inhale.
Yeah, I guess.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
That's like having a naked woman in bed and doing anything with her. Did you lose your headphone?
Yeah. Gotta watch.
That's a good omen.
Gotta watch old folks.
So going back to this marijuana, you said you've never used it. You've never been paused with that question before.
I've never been around people who did. It's a choice, and I always made a choice. Yeah. I never knew what. I would be reluctant to breathe or eat anything that could have, knowingly could have negative impact on.
But alcohol went through the same transition, with prohibition, and it was illegal, and then they were having private clubs and members only, and cops raided, blah, 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 blah. Ask Al Capone. He came up with the whole underground alcohol consumption and gambling thing, right?
Sure.
And they couldn't get him for anything like that, but they got him for tax evasion. But that's a whole different subject. But the purpose of it, the why I brought that up is because alcohol went through the same thing.
Yes.
There was a lot of people, in fact, the whole government was against alcohol. And the states were trying to do their own thing, and they were doing it illegally. A lot of private entrepreneurs were doing it all illegally. And I mean, do you see that same transition? What they did with alcohol would splinter off onto, trying to direct marijuana into federal law and make it regulated by our government?
I don't know, frankly. I think whether it be better or worse is always subjective, and it's something that I have no opinion on because I really haven't thought about it. You know, I don't wake up in the morning wishing I could have a drag on a puff of marijuana. I don't.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
And I don't drink much.
Well, you know, besides that,
Yeah.
getting high on marijuana, there's a whole lot of other medical benefits towards it as well.
Sure there are.
It's not like alcohol. There is
Very
no
little.
medical benefits to alcohol at all. You just get
It's a
drunk.
good disinfectant if
Or
you
feel
want to.
good, or try to band-aid some bad memory you had. But with marijuana, it's different. I mean, there are whole different medical benefits
Yeah.
for the use
See,
of
I'm not
marijuana.
well versed on that. When the subject comes up, it's just a non-subject to me in my life. I have seen people, and I have very close, even somebody in distant in my family, takes it and uses it regularly for medical purposes.
There you go.
And if it has a good use, that's fine.
All right, I'll leave that topic alone. I'll go.
I think
current.
the federal government's missing a lot of tax dollars.
They
Just
are.
like they did on the alcohol.
They are missing a lot of tax dollars that they could be getting, especially to fund the vaccination of the current epidemic, which is the coronavirus.
Sure.
Now, as you see, our government is shut down basically.
Right.
I mean, as far as non-essentials are
See,
concerned.
the government didn't shut down. They want to
No,
shut
the government's
down our
not shut down
society.
because you know
They
the
wanna shut down
vets
our
are still getting
society.
paid and all that. That's a good thing because that could be a whole
Yeah.
chaos. But as far as our non-essential businesses, they're all practically shut down. As a newly elected congressperson and with this never before history that we're living.
Our response, yeah.
Right. What would you do? What would you do as a congressman to get our economy back?
The economy?
The economy is crashing. I mean, that was Donald Trump's Trump speech.
Yeah.
It was about how the economy is going and stocks are up and business is booming and unemployment is low. It's now all opposite. Well, what would you do as a congressman to get the economy back? And what would you do for your constituents in Congressional District 3 to help those small business owners get back on their feet?
Okay. Well, aside from a stimulus package, I'm one that believes in keep the government out of it. Keep the government out of business, and the people will solve it. If the less government, like Reagan and some of the others, the less is the better for business.
Right.
The less regulation we can have. Give them the stimulus if we have to, where it needs to be applied. Keep the federal services like our post office and our regulating of our commerce so that things can flow again, and get rid of some of our, I know it sounds good, and it always sounds good, it's don't get within 6 feet of each other and things like that.
Jim, move over here.
Yeah, right. And, well, it all depends on how you measure it. Reduce some of the paperwork. And I've heard a statistic that in a doctor's office, and I've asked several administrators of doctor's office, 55% of the work they do is government required in government forms. I was a life insurance agent, I still am, but when I first started in my business, we had about a 4-page application for securities for a mutual fund. Now they're up to 37.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of tree killing.
And that's not a lot of tree killing, but it's just a lot of interference, and again, that's government in our business.
Yeah.
So many of the things you do today when you fill out forms, it's government mandated. It's all it is. So if we can get the government out of our business, the as much as possible. Don't let it go, where they're violating people and crooked, but keep it regulated as little as possible.
How you getting your message out there? Because you guys are on shutdown. You can't do any grassroots. You
Exactly.
can't show up to any meet and greets.
Yeah, we got to.
How you getting your name out there, Mr. Bridges?
Well, I haven't started yet, really, but I'll use the internet a lot. Unfortunately, we've gotten to the point, I often say very in a friendly, funny way that I'm a man of the 90s. But unfortunately, it's the 1890s, not the 90s, because I'm not high tech. It's like my telephone. That's an intimidator as far as I'm concerned. I don't like it. I lose a lot of things on it. But unfortunately, the businesses love the internet. And I think the reason they like it is because they can only tell you what they want you to know.
Do you know what issues is facing your district? And by the way, what are your boundary lines for Congressional District 3?
I go pretty much, I wasn't here in the state. I moved back in December, Steve. So I wasn't here when they broke off District 4. I'm glad they did. At the time...
because of the census.
Yeah.
Everybody should fill that out.
That's right. We wrap around the south side of Las Vegas, and it goes almost all the way around, and it goes south.
Is it going all the way to Prim?
Yep.
Okay. So you got Good Springs in there and all that?
Yeah, and you got Boulder City, all good places to go. Sloan,
How about Laughlin or? Not quite that far?
No, if it includes...
because you got Boulder City in there, so I was figuring that
yeah,
Laughlin.
it goes on down. I really don't know where the split was. I've got a sheet at home that I need to review, but when I ran before, it wrapped around the west side of Las Vegas, all the way up to Charleston Boulevard, and then south all the way to the border, Laughlin, and Prim, and then over to Mesquite. I went over campaigning in Mesquite. I learned after the fact that it was one of the largest congressional districts in the country. And
Mesquite is?
No.
CD3. CD3 before
Three,
they
CD3.
drew.
Yeah,
before they
got 4.
Exactly. Population-wise.
Yeah, now Mesquite is part of 4.
Yeah. That's and I've forgotten exactly where the breakout is over there.
Right.
But between here and there somewhere. But I'm glad they did. It was way too big.
So you're saying that you took off for 4 years to go to Florida, right?
I went to Texas.
Oh, you went to Texas?
Yeah, I'm a native Texan. And my wife at the time, I had some medical issues, and there's a senior community over there it used to be called Air Force Village.
Right.
And it's now called Blue Skies of Texas. And they have independent living facilities, and you go all the way from independent living to out the door in a box. And you've got
It sounds very welcoming.
For us, it's a good place for the people. It has intensive care. You have assisted living, and then you have people that are really totally need care all the time.
Yeah.
And we have hospice care, and it's all right there. And Mrs. LeMay started it for senior widows, officers' widows, and when they didn't have any money, and before they had things like the SGLI, the insurance that they provide them now. But I was having medical issues, and so my wife wanted to go there. so I moved back there. I'm not a communal living person, and I like it. I like the people there, but I like to see some young people. When you go to a senior living facility, the people are old.
Yeah.
You know, it's how do you get to be a senior?
They got a key word in there, senior. It's a key word. It's not called youth of today.
But
Well, Mr. Bridges, we want to thank you very much for coming on.
well, I appreciate the
And I appreciate
opportunity
you
to come out.
spending some time with us this afternoon. Or, well, I guess it's still morning.
One of my favorites.
For me, it's evening. I'm working overnights right now. So, can you do us a favor? Can you look into the camera?
Sure.
And tell the constituents of Congressional District 3 why they should vote for you?
Well, if you're upset with your party and they're no longer really representing you, look us over. Be independent. We're a nation of supposedly independent thinkers and free thinkers and people who do things for ourselves. And if you feel that way and you feel your party is no longer representing you and have your interest at heart, give us a look and check us out and see what you find. I think you'll like us. We are definitely constitutional. In fact, in every other state but Nevada, we're called the Constitution Party. And if you believe in the things that we do, come join us. I think you can be effective. History has proven that a very few people who are dedicated and committed can make great big changes. Thank you.
Did you want to give the viewers and listeners a point of contact and how they can get in contact with you or how they can help in your campaign?
Sure. My email address is simply my name, Ed Bridges, and the number 2 at AOL.com. And you can respond there. My telephone number is 702-994-8250. I answer it myself and don't have an organization that you have to go through. You'll be talking to me, and we'll work things out.
Well, Mr. Bridges, we'd like to thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Folks, that's Ed Bridges, who's running for United States Congress for Congressional District 3 in Nevada's Congressional District 3. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jonas for Veterans in Politics. Until next time.